All righty. Welcome back, everyone, to the Heights podcast. We have on maybe my favorite guest so far.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big deal. It's a big deal. You're our first guest. No, I'm
Oh,
just we've had on a handful of guests, but today we have on Sam Kelly. We are close friends. We worked together, actually. Well, she was my boss when I met her at the Theology of the Body
Mhm.
Institute when I was an intern. Were you director of programs? Was that your title? Or
yeah, I think so.
okay. So that was when I was 21. 7 years ago. That's crazy how
That's
it's
wild.
7 years ago.
Look at us
And
now.
yeah, so Sam has seen me at my most vulnerable states of life, crying a lot and experiencing the power of the theology of the body and all of that. So I am very excited to have Sam Kelly. Sam is founder and president of Fierce Athlete. She's doing awesome work with women's sports and just really speaking to the heart of women. So Sam, thanks for coming on.
Yeah, of course, Brendan. This is fun.
This is really fun. So Sam, before we dive in, tell the viewers, the listeners more about Fierce Athlete and the work that you're doing.
Yeah, so interestingly, Brendan, when you and I met, I was working with the Theology of the Body Institute and deeply soaking myself in the teaching because I realized that it was the antidote to our times, which I think we could both agree on. But my background was that I was a Division I soccer player, and then I was a missionary working with Division I athletes, and I saw all the brokenness, and I felt like when we introduce people to Jesus, that's the most important thing. But then what? Like, how do we teach them to live in freedom? And when I encountered Theology of the Body, that shifted my trajectory. And so I formed Fierce in order to promote true identity and femininity in female athletics. Essentially, it's infusing TOB into sport, really reclaiming the identity of women within sport, helping women embrace their true femininity in sport, and then really helping shift a very toxic culture back towards order and truth.
That's awesome. So, Sam, I want everyone to know this about Sam is one of few people I really look up to because she takes this life very seriously, striving for holiness. I remember, Sam, you told me when I was an intern that your goal every morning, which I think you did it most days, but it was like to get a holy hour in, mass, and a workout before work at 9. And you are hardworking, you're a holy woman. And so I just want everyone to know that about you. And you're a great friend. So thank you for the work you're doing. And speaking to the heart of women, what would you say, what your experience in college, you played soccer at UConn, and the work you're doing right now, particularly in women's sports, but you can also just in the women that you encounter, what are women struggling with? You mentioned some toxic areas within women's sports, but just in women in general, what are kind of the things they're struggling with?
Yeah, I'm going to start with young people generally, because I think that then filters in particularly to women in a different way than men. I think the biggest question people are asking today, especially our young people, is who am I? We are in a crisis of identity, and people ultimately they don't know who they are. They don't know for what they were created. And the result of that is a lot of them trying to figure it out in a lot of unhealthy ways. And so we really have like two conflicting worldviews that clash, and then most people kind of live somewhere in between. So we have kind of this Catholic Christian worldview where there is a God and there is order, and we are created male and female, and there's an order to marriage and there's an order to sexuality, and it's all within God's plan. And then we have this contrasting theory kind of rooted in gender theory, which is secular theory. There is no God, therefore I am my own God, therefore I can do whatever I want, recreate whatever I want, and there's no truth or boundaries. And so most people, I would say, operate somewhere in the middle. And that just leads to a ton of confusion. How that particularly manifests in women, gosh, so many ways. Unhealthy relationships. I think there's a lot of our young women like just trying to live up to a false standard, so wearing a lot of masks because they're trying to compare themselves to what they see every day on social media. There's a lot of body hate, body shame, eating disorders. Now we have this kind of whole movement, and especially in women's sports, there's a lot of same-sex attraction and confusion in terms of sexuality, a lot of mental health. I mean, but I believe, and this is a bold claim, it's all a lack of understanding of who we really are.
Yeah, I was just watching a TikTok video today of a woman. It got viral. It went viral, and she's basically saying like, I'm working out and I'm the healthiest I've ever been. I'm successful in my career, and I still can't find a man. And she's like starting to break down, and she's like, what else do I need to fix about myself? How else do I need to conform or mold myself to be loved? And she's like, you know, I have a dog, but I long for a man to share my life with. But she's just talking about how her therapist and her family are saying, these are all the things you're doing wrong. And she's just like, so am I just wrong? Am I just messed up? And this is just who I am. And I saw this video, but I've seen this with certain women I've spoken to, whether it's they believe the lie that I'm not enough and there's something in them that they need to perform, and they need to be beautiful or conform to a certain image that social media tells them to. And I think it's like what you're saying, a lack of identity in who they really are. So what do you, when you're encountering this, what are you saying to women? How do you speak into their hearts so that they can embrace their true femininity and true identity?
Yeah. I'll offer one comment on what you just said, and then it feeds into the question you asked. Like the other piece of our identity, well, first, our identity is that we're beloved sons and daughters of God, period. So that's where I start. But the other piece of our identity is that we're made for relationship, ultimately with the Lord. And so that longing of that woman's heart is real. She's just she's pointing it towards something that's good. But really what she's longing for is the Lord.
Yeah.
I mean, with every woman, every human being that we interact with, what they're really longing for is the Lord. That's really what they've been created for. And on this side of heaven, that will never be fully fulfilled. But there are things, marriage being one of them, a husband being one of them, that point me towards that. So with the women I work with, I try to like clear away, like, let's not talk about the symptoms. Let's like talk about the core of this. You know, our core identity is not in, I kind of talk about my 3 identity pieces. So it's not in what you do. It's not in what you look like, and it's not in others' opinions of you. Like all those things contribute to your sense of self. They always have, you know, your parents' opinion or being an athlete. But those things, if we base our identity solely on those things, they let us down ultimately, because they're conditional. Well, if only I do X, will I be good enough, like you said. And so like with the women I work with, helping them kind of push back all the noise, all the conformity, all the social media, and really come to a realization that you are a daughter of God, period. That's it. And yet that is it, you know, like that is enough. When you can embrace the fullness of that truth, that is enough to like set you free. And then the freedom to be who God created you to be, which is a really beautiful period of self-discovery where you kind of address the other things. But it has to start with my daughterhood, or for you, it has to start with your sonship. You know, that's fundamental.
Yeah. I mean, how do you, I mean, this is a complex question, but like, how do men and women do that? Is it like practically like, hey, like stop, like get off your phone for a little bit? Like, or is it you need to be praying more and just kind of resting in that identity? You need to surround yourself by people who can affirm that. I mean, any kind of practicals that you would give people if people are like, I know in my head I'm beloved daughter, but definitely don't live that way or truly think, or deep down, what would you say?
Yeah, yeah. No, I love the practical, so thank you for asking that. I mean, I think what you alluded to is so fundamental. I tell people you need to spend 15 minutes a day in silent prayer. So that does mean put the phone away. That does mean give the Lord 15 minutes, and that does mean in that time listening, right? And asking him, "Who are you, Lord, and who am I?" And we can use scripture and supplemental things, but we need to really begin to hear and learn the voice of God. And it's a relationship, so that's only developed, just like a human relationship, by spending time with that person and by beginning to understand their voice, the inflections in their voice, who they are, and then beginning to like listen to who we are. So that's the first. I'd say the second is really doing an analysis of your identity, like break down those three categories I said. Again, what I do, what I look like, and others' opinions of me. And you usually will find that one of them is stronger. I found this with the women I work with. Like, some people are big people pleasers, and they really struggle with what other people think of them, and that's where they base their identity. Others, it's like what I do, what I've accomplished, or how I've failed, or how I've fallen short. Like, we identify or we define ourselves by our shame or our pain or our sin or what's happened to us. And then the third is what I look like, which especially for women in the day of social media, it's constant comparison. And coming back and again allowing the Lord to heal your self-image and tell you why he created you the way he created you. Those things I find are a great, intense but great starting place.
Yeah. So what was it for you? I mean, you encountered the theology of the body, that's shaped you and that's shaped the work you're doing. I mean, before theology of the body, which most people, if they listen to this podcast, know what I'm talking about, but the biblical vision of who we are as man and woman. How did you view femininity before your encounter with the theology of the body? And how was the theology of the body healing for that? And what did you discover about what true femininity is?
This is like my favorite question.
Really?
Probably.
Right. Well, go. Hey, take the reins. Go.
Well, again, I think, and granted, like, I'm operating from this place, or I still am, from this sphere of women's sports, which historically, if you look at, wouldn't be considered feminine, like, from the eyes of the world. I think there's been a shift, especially recently, to recognize women in sport and things, and there's more women who are models for the women now, but historically men were model for women. The feminist movement, was huge in women's sports, all the things. But I would say I was operating definitely before encountering the Lord, but even after encountering the Lord, I think I was operating from this lie that I wasn't feminine, because I spent the majority of my time doing something that wasn't, I don't know, considered as feminine as having the time in college to get dressed up and wear makeup, where half the time I was in sweats because I was coming from workout or going to a workout, and so there was that false comparison to other women who I viewed as more quote unquote feminine, more gentle, more dainty, if you will. And we have to be, and this is something I've really prayed through and parsed through, especially as there's been so much confusion in our day over sexual identity, over masculinity and femininity. This word, which I don't love to use because it's been twisted, gender. There's a ton of confusion right now. And we have to be careful with our language, but the reality is that we are, and you've probably talked about this before, but we are a body-soul union. Like, that is our nature as a human person. We have a body and we have a soul, and they're united. And so the body reflects the soul and the soul reflects the body. And so the fact that I was created as a woman makes me feminine in my whole being, period. Right,
Mhm.
Brendan, the fact that you were created a man makes you masculine in your whole being. John Paul II says you almost can't even deny. I almost can't even deny my femininity. I can try to, and that's what people are trying to do today. They're creating this division in themselves, which is death. Like that's what happens at death. They're prematurely creating this death within themselves, and I've heard some people say that like that person's dead. And so receiving that, it was like, oh my goodness, I am already feminine. And my femininity, I'm going to keep going here. Just buckle up. My femininity is like rooted in my body. And so my body is different than your body, Brendan. My body is more receptive and yours is more external. And so the height of my femininity is my receptivity and my ability to bear life. The height of your masculinity is your sacrifice, your call to sacrifice. And so realizing like, wow, I always viewed sport as this maybe more masculine thing. And there is elements of sacrifice in sport, but there's a ton of receptivity. And women actually play sport naturally in a more receptive way. We're a little bit more team oriented. There's a little bit, if you look at like how the sport is played, it's a little, they say it's a little bit more grace filled or more beautiful of a game, where men's is more intense and, you know, aggressive. That reveals that inherent difference. And so I almost was just given this, when I realized all this on a rowing machine, by the way, is where I'm having these deep thoughts because I pray when I work out. I was like, I just was given permission to like thrive in my femininity, which was already there. It just was a redefinition of it, a true understanding of it, and the ability then to step into that.
That's awesome. So femininity is receptivity and the capacity to bear forth life. Is that what you said?
I'd say the height of it, right? There's so many things that make me feminine. It's just that I was created as a woman.
Yeah.
And I'm going to live that out different than the next woman, which is stunning. Yeah. Different than the next woman. It's not defined by our cultural norms, which is what our society says, because cultural norms change. This is rooted in our biology and in our design.
Yeah.
Which is freeing.
Yeah, I remember I one time did a talk on theology of the body, and I mentioned what you said, that to the ladies, by your very nature, you are feminine. And like afterwards they came up and talked and like, that's so freeing. Like, I don't have to like fit in this stereotype in order to be feminine, because I've been battling and struggling. Like, I'm not feminine because I don't fit into this stereotype. And it's like, no, your body is good. It's who you are. And you just by existing, you're radiating femininity, you know? So is there the ladies, the women that you work with, is that kind of a question on their heart, is like, what's true femininity? And are they just, I mean, I think you mentioned that already, but what are they saying? What do you think the culture is saying what femininity is, and how it's just false? It's a false image.
Yeah. Well, the truth always exists in between two extremes. I'm going to go there, Brendan. I don't know if you know what's coming.
Say whatever you want, Sam.
I'm going to go there because, okay.
So just, give it to us. What's going on? On one
extreme is this feminist rejection of my maternal side of motherhood, right? That motherhood weakens me and destroys my career, destroys my dreams, my hopes. It's a bad thing. Lie.
Yeah. So like, why are people saying that? Like, why are they saying that maternity, motherhood? Is it simply like, so you don't have a career and that's what you truly want or something? Or
yeah, I mean, I think it's, again, this is like the secular feminist movement, right? Women felt oppressed. They felt like they were just meant to stay home. And they wanted more opportunity. And there is some truth to that oppression, right? There's always been, I mean, biblically, I mean, look, from the beginning, from the fall, there's been this oppression of women. It's said that it will be a byproduct of the fall. And so I think it was this rebelling, but this overcompensation with the feminist movement of like, well, I need to reject my femininity. I need to reject my womanhood. I need to be more like a man, but I need to almost like take man's role from him. This is one of the reasons we have a ton of emasculization of men, because women have taken the role of a man, which isn't good. Like, you can be strong and you can be a CEO, but don't do it like a man. Do it like a woman. That's what the world needs, you know?
Yeah.
So that's the root there. I think it's also a lot of fear. All of us, none of us have had perfect families. But I think some people very particularly are very wounded by their family of origin. And so there's a fear of having children, rooted in some people's hearts. Yeah. So it's a mistaken view.
Yeah.
You know, it's interesting. I was talking yesterday to a woman who used to be a feminist, and she said, I didn't fully understand what it meant to be a woman until I got pregnant. Again, that's not everybody. And getting pregnant, she had a lot of body image, eating disorder stuff. Getting pregnant is not always the answer, right? I have never been pregnant, and I have so fully feminine and embraced that fully. And I've healed and grown a lot in that. So I don't want women to be like, well, you know. So, but there's a beauty. There's a beauty. I've heard that repeatedly. Women who have historically rejected that part of them. Okay, so let's go to the other end, which I'm going to go there. Ready?
Yeah.
Let's talk about the Harrison Butker speech. I haven't spoken about this yet.
Yeah.
That's the other extreme, right? It's a beautiful, but it's a very limited view of woman. And I think that's why people are so outraged.
Yeah.
Because they feel like, and I don't think that this was his intent.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I haven't watched the whole thing. I need to, so I get the full picture. But what I'm hearing is when he said, my wife embraced the greatest role, homemaker.
Yeah.
And that people are just saying, oh, Harrison is shoving women, that if you're not a homemaker, therefore you are not a woman or not feminine or whatever. And I need to watch the whole thing, but I don't think he was saying that. Maybe it was implicit in it. I haven't heard the whole thing. Maybe it was implicit. But yeah, what are your thoughts on it?
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's not what he was saying. I think he comes from a more traditionalist. I don't know the man. I can't judge his heart. But some of the other things he was saying in the speech reveals that he's a bit more traditionalist. Like, he kind of swings towards that side of things. Again, the church is vast and balanced. But I think what it pointed to is this, one of the reasons, because of what I just said, like, women revolted against that at the start of the feminist movement. A lot of women are like praising him for that. And a lot are really mad because I think it was a very, very incomplete answer. It points to a very beautiful piece of what femininity could be for somebody, right? Motherhood, homemaker. But I think he implied, and I don't know that this was his intent, right? And you're also speaking to a bunch of young, unmarried, college-age women who probably have all wanted to meet their spouse at a Catholic college, and a lot of them haven't, right? And so we got to be sensitive to the audience. But I feel like it was reductionistic, if that's a word. And I think the proper response is, like, John Paul II has a letter to women, and he thanks mothers, he thanks the homemakers, he thanks the wives, but he also thanks the single women. He also thanks religious women. He also thanks working women, right? Like, to what we were saying before, there's no one box or way to live out your femininity. It's the discernment for each individual person. What is my call? What is my vocation? Like, there are so many other facets to it that it was a little bit reductionistic, and I think that's why people are mad, because it's sad because it's falsely portraying the church, and only a sliver of the church and a sliver of beauty. Now, to be fair, he does very beautifully compliment his wife, which is stunning, right? That's very, like, that's what women desire. So again, truth, and I just alluded to what it is, like the fullness of femininity. It's lived in all sorts of ways, through our vocation, through our motherhood, physical, or where he didn't really allude to is that spiritual motherhood. We are all called to be mothers, period.
Yeah.
But it's just, how does that lived out in our lives is going to look very different for different people.
Yeah. And I often talk about Joan of Arc. I mean, she led the soldiers or into battle, and I don't know what she wasn't married. How old was she? Was she in her 20s or something, like younger 20s or even
I think even younger. I think
like
late teens or early 20s.
okay. Yeah, and she's a canonized saint and living out her femininity in that unique way. So I love what you said too. It's I mean ultimately motherhood, the fulfillment of femininity, you might say, are a great expression, but it doesn't mean simply physical.
Mm-hmm.
That spiritual, and whether that might just be nurturing every person and also receiving them and whatever, and then bearing forth life in that way, in a spiritual and mystical way. Yeah. So I need to go back and watch the Harrison Butker and do maybe a review on it. Any other thoughts on the Harrison Butker?
TOB commentary.
Yeah.
I'll
did
keep
you
it
like it or did you not like it? Was it kind of like, I think it did more harm than it did good?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was is a little immature.
Yeah.
I would say overall.
Yeah.
So
okay.
again, a slivered view. Yeah. And very true in some of its slivered views, but what's the fullness? I always love the fullness.
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah. So okay. I'd like for you to first, could you speak into the heart of a man? Is that to maybe Harrison Butker? What would you say to men? What would you say? I mean, what's going on with men these days that women, you yourself, other women you talk to, what are they frustrated in with men? What are some things where it's just like we need to call them higher or encourage them to do X, Y, or Z? What would you say to men these days? What would you say to Harrison Butker? I don't know. Just what would you say?
I don't know about to Harrison. But I think in general, right? Again, truth is in the middle. We've seen with men this like macho womanizer type man on one end, which with the over sexualization of our culture, women becoming more sexually active, that's easier to do, right? I'm not saying it's all men. I'm saying women have just thrown. Okay,
yeah.
I don't know if I want to say it like that, but like, there's the reality.
I don't know if this is crazy, but I saw this statistic. I think it's a right statistic, but it said every man who has participated in the hookup culture, there are 4 women. So women are 4 times more likely and are participating in the hookup culture. And mainly it's easier for them, if you will, to do it. But we're seeing
which is funny because I wouldn't believe that. I'd say it's easier for men.
Isn't that oh, really?
I don't know.
That's what you'd actually say?
That's what I would think. I mean, I don't have much experience with it, but like I would think.
I mean, I feel like
but that's a shocking statistic.
Yeah, no, I thought it was shocking too, but I get it in the sense that there are a lot of men that like want to sleep around, but they can't get a woman to do it because women are more choosy.
So you're saying, so you're not saying 4 times more women are sleeping around. You're saying
no, there are more women sleeping around. There are 4 times women sleeping around. So if one guy is sleeping around, there are 4. So
then wouldn't we have more options?
So
I don't know. Why are we arguing about this?
I know. Yeah. Okay.
I know.
I'll circle it back and then we'll go back to what you're saying. So in other words, like one man might be sleeping with many women, but a lot of women might be sleeping just with one guy.
Oh, I would agree.
Yeah.
I get that.
Yeah. So generally, there's a lot of women participating in the hookup culture and a smaller amount of men participating in it.
But men have more partners.
Have a ton of partners. Yeah.
Right. That makes sense.
Okay. So let's circle.
Which is still terrible.
Yeah. I mean, yeah.
So there's that type of man. And then I think on the other end, I mean, you see this all over the media. Like every show has either a macho guy or it has the completely incompetent man who has no role, can't do anything right, is a ditz. It's like what is being told to men. It's like you either have to be a womanizer or you have no spine. And nothing is more infuriating to a woman, especially a woman who knows who she is, right? I mean, I think that was the cry of that woman in that TikTok video that you saw. Like, she's like this strong woman, and all she wants is for a strong man, one, to not be intimidated by her, but to like step up to the challenge and pursue her. That's what her heart has been oriented towards since Eve. Like,
Yeah.
she wants to be seen and known by a man, which is beautiful. And they say men want to behold that. I would have, well, let me give a challenge to women first. I would say, because I think I need to preface it before I ask of men. Like, for women, like, we need to be emotionally careful, because I think a lot of men shy away from being chivalrous, stepping up, doing something like opening a door, because women overread into it. It's like, just because a guy opens the door doesn't mean he wants to date you. Just because he talks to you doesn't mean he wants to date you. Maybe he just is being kind, you know? And women are so desperate for love that they take everything at like the nth degree, emotional impurity. But for men, I would say, like, having that sacrificial heart. I have arms. I'm a strong woman. I know it's a silly example, but I love when a man opens the door for me. And that doesn't degrade my femininity. I think men are afraid because women for so long have said, you're the weaker sex, or you're this, or you're that. It's like, no, we're complementary. We're both strong. I'm so pro man. But like, for men to step up and sacrifice himself in small ways for women, looking to do that, looking to complement in a pure way, like that allows you to exercise your sacrifice, and that allows me to exercise my receptivity. I think in our friendship, Brendan, it's like, that's how it is. It's beautiful. It's free. It's a friendship. You've learned in ways to sacrifice for me, and I've learned in ways to give you life, just in how we interact. Right. It's beautiful. And I think, like, that would be one encouragement to the listeners is, you need, and boundaries between male and female friendships are different than boundaries between same-sex friendships. But we need to be friends with each other too. And I would say even first. The other thing I would say is, if you like a woman, just state your intentions. Like, don't say, hey, do you want to hang out? Like, can I take you on a date? And that's not binding. That's just getting to know somebody, right? Dating is an opportunity to get to know somebody, period. Yes, as you go further along, it could, then you state your intentions of like, I'd like this to be official. But I think there's so much ambiguity that leaves women's hearts confused and then grasping and then frustrated, that can be hard.
Yeah. I feel like, I mean, at least the topic of dating, it's, at least what I'm seeing is, it's really a struggle with people today. And I think people are afraid. They might have a fear, like, gosh, there's already been so many wounds, and men have done poor things already. And then men might begin to have fears to pursue women, because, like, how do I even, I'm walking on eggshells. Or there might be a high expectation because of social media. And like what you said, I mean, people just need to go out and start meeting people. You know, let's get back to just talking to people face to face. Yeah. So, I mean, are you seeing in your work a lot of hope? Are you seeing a lot of kind of redemption and healing of relationships between men and women? Or it's like these wounds go deep, and it's, but are you seeing some hope? I mean, I hope you are.
Most days. No, you know, when we're rooted in the Lord, there's always hope. I'm a very optimistic person, but I think that's because I'm praying.
Yeah.
And I trust the Lord, because it is daunting. One, my own heart is daunting. My own story, my own wounds are daunting. And then I look at the stories and the wounds and the traumas of the women I deal with, and that can be daunting. And then I look at the state of our culture and the state of even just dating relationships, and that can be daunting. It's why we're doing what we're doing, right?
Yeah.
But the only thing that keeps me going is hope. And I do see fruits. I do see we are in a time of healing. We are in a time of great need of healing. I think the Holy Spirit's working really beautifully right now in the church and in the world, because healing wasn't a big theme, 10 years ago. I feel like there's a lot of healing ministries. There's a lot of deliverance ministries. There's a lot of just talking a sense of like false identity, in order to heal the identity of the person, in order to heal them from their wounds and their traumas and things. And so to anybody listening, like, that is huge. That is fundamental. You're like, okay, how do I do that? It's again, coming back to who you are, but then beginning to look with the Lord or with a trusted friend, somebody can pray with you, a priest, a therapist, at some of those things that have happened to you. Again, that's probably a whole nother conversation, Brendan.
Yeah.
But the beauty of healing, I see a ton of hope in that, because I see, daily I see women set free, men set free, free to be free from trauma and wounds and lies that and fears that they've lived by, but really stepping fully into a freedom of who they are as male and female. And that's, that's stunning. And that is and then what's going to really heal the culture on a broader sense, because when you have somebody who authentically knows who they are, it calls others around them higher.
Yeah. I think I agree with you that healing is beginning to grow and grow because of the lies that are so deep. I was speaking at a women's high school, an all women's high school, and God spoke to me before, Brendan, I want you to tell them that they're enough. That's all I want you to do. That's what and so in the middle of my presentation, I just said that the Lord wants you to know that you're enough right where you are. And like, they came out to me after, like, oh my gosh, like I needed to hear that. Like that just pierced my heart. Like I need to hear that I'm enough. And so I think healing and being attentive to the lies that are in our hearts and renouncing them and announcing the truth, because that's when we live in freedom, So Sam, thanks for everything. Thanks for the conversation. Where could people learn more about you? Maybe the book that you wrote. I read it. Maybe give them a little spiel of where they can learn more about what you're doing and maybe the book.
Yeah, so you can head to fierce.org. That will lead you to, we have Fierce Athlete, we have Fierce Coach, we're launching Fierce Forever, all these different facets.
Fierce Forever?
Yeah.
I haven't heard about Fierce Forever.
I know. It's coming in hot. So it's for retired athletes.
Okay.
Once an athlete, always an athlete. So I'm not going to say former athletes.
Fierce Forever.
We have a whole retirement kind of a healing course coming out, which is exciting. And then we have a coaches branch and then athletes branch. So fierce.org. There's a link to my book on there. It's called Be Fierce, The Athlete's Guide to Growing Physically, Mentally, and Spiritually. And I think Fierce Athlete all over social media is our handle.
Yeah. Cool. Sweet. Thanks, Sam.
Of course, Brendan.
Always.
Always a gift.
Yeah. All right. See you, everyone.